Okay, so the morphological homologies, those are like the structural features. For example, the arrangement of the bones and forelimbs of mammals. And then the molecular is obviously the DNA sequences that are related. Organisms that share morphological or gene sequences are likely to be closely related, but these are not directly related. So, for example, an organism can have like a morphological homology and not have DNA sequences that are similar. For example, is the Hawaiian silver wort plants. Some are tall and twiggy, while others are short and dense, but they have close DNA sequences, so they are considered molecular homologies. Okay, so homology versus analogy? Analogy, yeah. Analogous means they evolve from environmental changes, not from a shared ancestor. An example of this would be convergent evolution. And these may cause animals from different evolutionary lineages to have similar adaptations, but that doesn't mean that they came from a similar ancestor. They just have similar traits. An example of this is birds and bats. The skeletal systems of birds and bats, they're similar, but over time their wings have evolved, and that's because of like environmental factors and their use and like what they needed to use their wings for.
Right. One thing I want you guys to keep in mind is that, okay, the bones inside their upper extremity, like the humerus, the radius ulna, wrist bones, the phalanges, those are homologous in between the birds and bats. But keep in mind what Emily is saying here is the fact that the bird's upper extremity evolved into a wing and the bat's upper extremity evolved into a wing is what is analogous. Do you guys understand the difference?
I thought analogy was like function, like you can have different bones with similar functions, and then homology was the actual bones themselves are like similar.
Not always. Not always. Analogous just means that it looks like it was derived from a common ancestor, but actually wasn't.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're wings on both birds and bats is analogous. Everything else about them is homologous.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, and then the bats, they use like a stretched membrane to fly, while birds, they like use their feathers and everything to fly. So that's an example of how they're analogous. Okay, so the more two complex structures are similar, the more likely it is that they came from a common ancestor. Also, if they share part of their nucleotide sequences, it's likely that they also came from a common ancestor. Okay, so how to determine molecular homologies? You align comparable sequences from the species being studied. These actually, they might be different due to deletions and insertions, but that doesn't mean that they didn't come from a common ancestor. And molecular homoplasias?
Yeah, I always have a tough time with that word. Homoplasies.
Yeah, they share the bases in the nucleotide sequences, but they're not actually related. So that's one of the troubles scientists have when determining how to classify all these organisms. Okay, so that's the end of 26.2. Yeah, I did 26.3. That's in Google Drive if you want to open that up now, if you haven't already. It's just called Concept 26.3.
How many more presentations do we have? One.
Are we gonna copy the concept factors if you don't finish for the meeting?
I would like to at least get the essay portion out of the way.
So it'll be on the earlier chapter?
Did you guys find it?
Yeah, I put
Yeah.
it on
Yeah.
Schoology, what the essay's on.
People won't be here. You're trying to go for time.
Videos aren't popping up.
They won't be here. Well, just because I have to definitely have to go into the meeting.
Yeah.
We just have to do different sections. It's hard to upload when you're a bunch of different 5-minute ones and 1 10-minute one. No, but like 3 of these were all just 5 minutes.
Okay, are you guys ready?
6, 4.
Yes.
Okay, this is concept 26.3. And the majority of this section is about cladistics. And cladistics are methods used to determine phylogeny from homologous structures. And this puts organisms in different clades. And a clade is an ancestral species in all of its descendants. Clades are nested within larger clades. So for example, the cat group, Felidae, is that how you say it?
Which one?
The cat group. It's like, okay. So the cat group, it represents a clade within a larger clade, like the carnivores. And this clade also would include the dog group. And so that's an example of like a clade within another clade. There's different kinds of clade groups. Monophyletic, they consist of an ancestral species and all of its descendants. Polyphyletic includes distantly related species, but does not include their most common ancestor. Paraphyletic consists of an ancestral species and some of its descendants. And from the words, you can just like derive the meaning. Like obviously, mono means one, and then phyletic, it means tribe, so single tribe, and would consist of one ancestral species. And then polyphyletic, many tribes, so that consists of like many different clades and groups. And then paraphyletic, beside, so like para sort of like means beside, so like beside the tribe, so that includes species and like other with other clades.
Do you have any diagrams
I
of
do.
this? Okay. There we go.
Okay, so as you can see for monophyletic, it includes all of like the descendants and all of the organisms within them. And then polyphyletic, it includes distantly related ancestors, but it doesn't include like the most common ancestor.
Okay, so in the polyphyletic clade, we haven't identified yet. Is that what you're saying? We haven't identified yet that common ancestor. We just know that they're related.
Yeah, it does
We
not.
just can't trace it back to that ancestor.
Exactly, it does not include a common ancestor.
Okay, so that's what's putting it into a polyphyletic clade.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then paraphyletic, it consists of an ancestral species and some of its descendants. So it includes one ancestral species and then its descendants, but it leaves out the rest. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Anyone?
No.
Not even Jacqueline?
Good, Jack.
Okay. Okay, so looking at this diagram, can anyone label what a polyphyletic group would be? Jacqueline?
The T-first and the Hyraxes.
Yes. Got it. Can anyone do what the monophyletic group would be? Anyone? Jacqueline?
The Hyraxes, manatees, and elephants.
Yes. Good job. And then finally, the paraphyletic. Anyone?
Pigs and horses.
No, that would be an example of polyphyletic. So no one knows the paraphyletic. Kate?
Oh, wouldn't it be like elephants and manatees, but then like you need the furthest back?
Yeah, you would
ancestors,
need-
So you'd like go to the
Yeah,
green.
whatever is right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sophia, do you have a
It
question?
would be like pigs and then, what is it, what is this?
Yeah, it would consist
Pigs
of
and then,
pigs and like ruminants, and then whatever like is right here too. Whatever that is. It's not included in the diagram.
But would it include the horse part then?
No. No, it wouldn't, because it's just one branch.
Okay.
Okay, so shared ancestral characters, and that's a character that originated in an ancestor of the taxon. So this is an example of backbones in all vertebrates, obviously. Shared derived characters are an evolutionary trait unique to a single clade, and this is an example of hair in all mammals, but some of their ancestors didn't have hair. So that's like a derived character for that specific clade. Does anyone have any questions on that?
See, what you're saying is the hair is unique to mammals alone.
Yeah,
Okay,
none of the other like vertebrates.
okay.
Inferring phylogenies using derived characteristics. Shared derived characters are unique to a particular class. You can determine where each derived character came from by examining a clade. And you can, you can obviously determine the clade by examining these derived characters. Okay, so examine a clade. This is the picture. So to examine a clade, you would and like to see like what organisms like are related, you would pick an in-group, and for example, the in-group of this this clade would be the leopard to the lamprey, and the lancelet would be considered the outgroup because it is because it diverged from the rest of the clade, because it obviously a lancelet doesn't have a vertebrae while the other ones do, and that's
But they do have the notochord.
yeah. And then you can put all that data into like a chart, and these obviously the organisms with the more advanced like evolutionary traits are more advanced and more higher up like on a clade. Anyone have any questions on that?
So would the lamprey, bass, frog, turtle, leopard all be considered an in-group?
Yeah, they're the in-group because they're most related to each other.
But the out-group is only like one animal? For this.
Yeah, could it be, for this chart, it's one animal, yes.
But it could be more than one too?
Could it be more than one animal, Doc?
Could be.
Well, then how do you know which one is the out-group and which one's the in-group?
You would have to make it up, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would base it on that derived characteristic. So the lancelet is in the outgroup because it lacks the one thing that all the other animals there have,
Alright.
vertebrae.
Yeah.
But the lancelet plus everybody else has a notochord, which puts them in the phylum Chordata.
Yeah, and then obviously, like if you wanted to, you can put like these in the in group, and then you can put these two out in the out group, and then the lamprey would be in the out group and the lancelet because they wouldn't have the hinged jaws, while the other ones would have.
So it's based on what characteristic you've chosen.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Example like in the chart.
What's
Yeah.
What's amnion?
Amniote?
Yeah,
Amnion?
what does that specify?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
what
an
that is.
amnion is an animal who has this fluid around the developing embryo where you don't require it to be in water, okay? So that would be like, for example, the reptiles and the mammals are amniotes, as are birds. They can reproduce without water because they have an amniotic fluid around the developing embryo. Okay, whether it's in the womb or in an egg, it doesn't matter. Okay, so they're in the in group. The other ones are in the out group because their eggs require water in order to develop. They don't have an amniotic fluid. So animals that produce that amniotic fluid around the developing embryo, they're called amniotes.
Any other questions about this?
Fantastic. Really good.
Okay, phylogenetic trees. There's different kinds of phylogenetic trees, and you have to like determine like what each means, and usually they'll have like a key behind it too. In certain, like in the phylogenetic trees that we've been examining, the length of the branches do not indicate the degree of evolutionary change in each lineage. But like there's other trees that we'll be examining like later on. For example, the chronology of the branches are relative, earlier versus later, which means like maybe one organism evolved earlier than another organism. That organism would be higher up on the phylogenetic tree. Also, in some trees, branch lengths are proportionate to amount of evolutionary change. For example, this is one of evolutionary change. You can just like ignore like all the numbers and the animals basically on it. But what this is saying is that since this line is longest, that it went through the most evolutionary change. Is that right? It
Yeah,
went through the most,
since it branched off from a common ancestor.
yeah, opposed to these ones which have shorter branches. They didn't go through as much evolutionary change as like the monkey did. And then this this tree is an example of the time it takes for evolution to occur. And as you can see, everything is lined up. So it took them, they're all like, they haven't like gotten extinct yet, so they are still alive to present day. But as you can see like the different times when they evolve into new organisms. Anyone have any questions about the two graphs? Okay. When building a phylogenetic tree, you're never 100% accurate in the tree, but scientists try to make the most concise tree by narrowing the possibilities by applying the principles of maximum parsimony,
Parsimony, I know. it's a weird
parsimony
word.
and maximum likelihood. Maximum parsimony is they shave away evolutionary traits, and they make numerous phylogenetic trees, but they pick the tree which has the least amount of evolutionary occurrences happening, and that helps them make like the most accurate change and to determine like what organisms are related to each other. Does anyone have any questions on that one? Okay, and then the next concept that scientists use are the maximum likelihood, and this identifies a tree most likely to have produced a given set of DNA data.
Emily, how much more